Can I invite you to take your seats, and we're going to get started. It is absolutely wonderful to see the Great Hall as full as this. It's been a rare occasion in the back end of COVID for us to have an event this large, and we're thrilled to be doing it and have such a distinguished speaker. I'm Andy Rich. I'm the Dean of the Colin Powell School, which is the School of Social Sciences and the largest student division here at City College. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to the 2023 Stanley Feingold Lecture on American Politics. Today, America at the Crossroads, a conversation with Congressman Hakeem Jeffries. It is a distinct honor. It is a distinct honor for us to have the House Democratic leader with us today, and we are very pleased to have Keith Wright, the leader of the New York County Democrats, with us to introduce Congressman Jeffries in a few minutes. This conversation, this event, is made possible by a group of City College alums, many of whom are with us today, who care deeply about the politics of this nation. A part of their passion for politics is rooted in perhaps the one thing they have in common. All of them had Stanley Feingold as a professor. Professor Feingold was beloved and a gifted professor of political science who taught at City College for almost 4 decades. He wrote about American politics, he taught about American politics, and he ignited a passion among his students over many generations to be active in the political process, to wonder about our political system, and to be forces for good in it. This annual event stems from their passion, and you'll hear a lot more about Professor Feingold later this afternoon. But as we begin, I want to thank them, and I want to invite all of Professor Feingold's former students just to stand up quickly so that we can acknowledge you. Thank you for being here. And I want to especially thank Sid Davidoff, who helped us line up today's speaker, as well as Paul Bergman and Anita Altman, who are the driving forces behind this every year. I welcome all of you to the spectacular place and everyone watching online on behalf of City College's president, Vince Boudreau, who had to be on the West Coast today, and on behalf of Provost Tony List, who is with us here in the front row. And it is our honor to have the Chancellor of the City University of New York with us today to offer introductory remarks. It's my pleasure to introduce Felix Matos Rodriguez, the 8th CUNY Chancellor, and a true champion for excellence, opportunity, and equity across the system of 25 campuses, with an enrollment of more than 243,000 degree-seeking students and more than 185,000 adult and continuing education students. Chancellor Rodriguez, thank you for being here. Let me turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dean Rich, for that introduction, and welcome. Buenas tardes to all of you, and thank you for being at this very special rendition of the Stanley Feingold Lecture. I am delighted to be part of an event that honors an alumni of CUNY and City College and a really esteemed and beloved professor. The one thing that Dean Rich did not mention as he asked the former students to stand up is that there's going to be a quiz for all those students at the end of the lecture, so you may make sure that you get all your notes and get ready for that. I'm happy to be here. I also want to give my thanks to the college president, Vince Boudreau. Dean Rich mentioned that he was on the West Coast, and before any rumors begin about, surfing, he's actually fundraising, and I told him that that was a great thing for him to be doing out there, and I hope he comes back with a lot of additional funding for City College, and you're really blessed to have such a dedicated president and also the entire administrative team here with Provost List and the rest of the faculty. Really a treasure to be here. Delighted to be in an event also that is sponsored by the Colin Powell School. The legacy of civic engagement, of service, of commitment, and of General Powell lives in this institution, and it lives in events like this, which engage public officials of such an esteemed trajectory as Congressman Jeffries and also some of the other participants who have been part of these lectures before. So we honor his legacy and remember him all the time. We are also delighted, Dean Rich mentioned that we have Keith Wright, who's going to be introducing the congressman in a second. So thank him for his years of service in the Assembly and his support for higher ed and CCNY. And I do want to make sure that everybody knows that Congressman Rangel is in the house. So why don't we give Charlie a big, big, big round of applause. And it's always a joy and an honor to see you, but also to see you here at CCNY. And I'm delighted also to be joined from my colleague, Senior Vice Chancellor Brenda Grace from the Central Office, who helps me to steer clear in many, many affairs. And actually, in a previous life, I think, provided legal advice in the same house where Congressman Jeffries served as an attorney before. So things do come full circle. What a treat to have Congressman Jeffries with us here today. I am thrilled to be part of an event that honors the legacy of a great teacher. One of the things that I miss in this administrative role is the years when I was in front of the classroom being energized by great students like the ones that we have here at CCNY. And there's nothing that a teacher loves more than to see the success of the students, the continuous engagement with the world of ideas, whatever field that professor is, and what a great tribute from all of you to keep that legacy and that memory alive. And I commend you all for being part of this effort here to honor that memory and that legacy of teaching and of influence. I think that the conversation with Congressman Jeffries is extremely timely. We live at times in which, particularly I think for our younger students, it's easy to be disillusioned. It's easy to feel that the future is murky. We see it in international affairs. We see it also in the aftermath of the pandemic, a very, very, very difficult time for us here as a country, and particularly here in New York City. And we see it in Washington, right? And it's easy to be maybe have a sense that there is dysfunction and lack of inspiration. And I think it's fitting that we have sort of the perfect antidote to that. Someone who conveys optimism, somebody that has a trajectory of public service. My folks gave me a little bio, but since you're going to be listening to him, I figure it'd be better if you hear from him about his own personal and professional trajectory leading to public service. But I'm sure here, given the nature of the talk, that there were a number of junkies that stayed late several weeks ago as the House kept trying to elect a speaker, right? And time after time, we stayed tuned to the TV and we saw vote after vote after vote after vote after vote, and right? Finally got done, right? But again, right, I don't think that it was an exercise that convey optimism, that convey pride in the way things should operate. But wasn't it great for all of us who stayed late to then to be able to listen to the words, right, of the minority leader who stood up, right, and gave a speech of optimism, of vision, right, of accomplishments, right? And then we could all go back to bed and say, okay, this is not as messed up as we think it was going to be, right? So I think that it can be no better guest to be part of this lecture than Congressman Jeffries. I also think that this is so much part of the DNA of the City University of New York and of City College. I mean, we're often incredibly proud of our role as an engine of social mobility, but it's equally important that we're proud of our role as an engine of civic mobility, right? Of making sure that all the students that go through our universities, that go through CCNY and all the other 24 campuses that make up the CUNY family, right, have those seeds of civic engagement, of service, of giving back, of understanding and cherishing our institutions and wanting to make them better in the communities they come from. I couldn't think of a better example of that than Congressman Jeffries. So thank you on behalf of the city, of the entire City University of New York. You have my greetings, and now it is my pleasure to introduce the individual who is going to introduce Congressman Jeffries. You'll have a little conga line here of work. To those here in Harlem and CCNY, Keith Wright is a name that needs no introduction. As I mentioned before, he represented Harlem in the State Assembly for 24 years, and he serves now as the Manhattan Democratic leader, a deep friend of higher ed, of CUNY and CCNY. So why don't we give a big warm welcome to Assemblyman and District Leader Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Chancellor. Good evening, everyone. I have had the honor of representing where we are sitting here today. And in Harlem as a whole, I've represented this area for over 24 years. And during that time, I have been able to interact with a wide variety, all aspects of people from all aspects of the spectrum. I want to thank the Feingold Lecture Series for allowing me the opportunity to introduce our next speaker. I have fought racism, demonstrated on picket lines, legislated, and even played basketball with our next speaker. We can all go to the internet and Google the resume of Hakeem Jeffries. However, please trust me when I tell you that he is indeed a true public servant. Yes, of course, he's a person of very high intellectual capability. Yes, he could have made a lot of money in the private sector. However, he has chosen to serve his community. And not only his community, but the community of New York, the state of New York, and now the whole country as a whole. I will never forget a photo. It was a while back, and Hakeem, you can tell me when it was. It was a picture in the New York Times, and it showed Hakeem Jeffries sitting at a desk by himself in Prospect Park, I believe. And it said, Constituent Services. Hakeem had set up a desk in Prospect Park by himself, I think it was on a Saturday, bringing his own constituent services, no staff, no other, just Hakeem himself. So I said, and it was a great picture in the New York Times. Any person in elective office would have loved to have gotten such a picture like that. So I asked Hakeem, how many people did you actually see that day? And he said, not many. But that's who Hakeem is. I've often said you can always tell the character of someone by how they play basketball. Those people that play basketball will know what I'm talking about. Hakeem always wants his team to win. He will do the dirty work. He'll do the boxing out. He'll grab the rebounds. And yes, he's even thrown a few elbows my way. But he's always competing fiercely. There's a reason that he was elected as the Democratic leader in the United States Congress. He's always prepared, and he will do whatever it takes for his team to win. We have all seen elected officials who will favor one community over another. That's not Hakeem. That is not Hakeem at all. I think we all saw how he was able to keep his composure, keep his cool during the 15 votes for Kevin McCarthy. Is that his name? Okay. And we all were able to witness a self-implosion of Congress, of the Republican Party. I know we're supposed to be nonpartisan, but I don't care. Hakeem Jeffries and the Democrats kept their composure. And of course, I could go on and on and on. However, I think, and the Chancellor made reference to it, I think the speech that Hakeem gave will actually go down in history as one of the best speeches ever made on the floors of Congress. And as he went down the alphabet on what it meant to be a Democrat and serving this country. So, without any further ado, I want to introduce the Democratic leader of the United States Congress. I want to introduce the next Speaker of the United States Congress. I want to introduce the man who will be the third in line to become the President of the United States. And I want to introduce to you a man that I've legislated with, a man that I'm proud to call my friend. I give to you Congressman Hakeem Jeffries.
So welcome again, and Congressman Jeffries, thank you for being here today. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and then we're going to open it up so that everybody gets a chance, or as many people as we can, to ask questions. And my questions are going to be geared towards the students in the audience. And I wondered if, I can't tell you how excited people were. You can tell by how many people are in the room that you were coming to speak. But that in contrast to that, folks are so cynical about Washington and about Congress. And I wondered, what part of their cynicism is well-founded, and what keeps you optimistic?
Well, thank you so much, Andy, and to Chancellor Rodriguez and Keith, thank you so much for your friendship and your generous introduction. And of course, always a blessing to be in the presence of the Lion of Lenox Avenue, the great Charlie Rangel, who I had the opportunity to serve with for a few terms and learn so much from. I think the moment that we find ourselves in right now in America, there's been tremendous progress that we've been able to make under the leadership of President Biden, Speaker Pelosi, and Leader Schumer, certainly in the last Congress, one of the most consequential Congresses in American history. When you think about what was accomplished, and that's incredibly important, we shouldn't lose sight of that fact. The American Rescue Plan that was passed saved the economy from a deep recession, if not worse. Put shots in arms, money in pockets, kids back in school, helped us emerge from a deadly, once-in-a-century pandemic. And then we went on, with the help of Adriano Espaillat and others, to pass the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which will create millions of good-paying jobs here in New York City, all across the land, fix our crumbling bridges, roads, tunnels, our airports, our sewer and water systems, our mass transportation systems. Make sure that young people in every community, every corner of America have access to high-speed internet. We passed gun safety legislation for the first time in 30 years that will save lives. More needs to be done, but it's a foundation to make sure that our young people can grow up in a safer space as we move forward here in America. And these are just the highlights. We passed the CHIPS and Science Act to bring domestic manufacturing jobs back home to the United States of America, and also make sure that for our young people, we're investing in science, technology, engineering, mathematics. I know CUNY does it well, and City College does that well. Making sure that our young people have the skills to succeed in the 21st century innovation economy. And then we topped off this string of incredible legislative success by passing the Inflation Reduction Act to strike a dramatic blow against the climate crisis, set our planet on a sustainable trajectory forward, the largest investment in dealing with the climate crisis in the history of the world. led by the United States of America, passed in the last Congress. Lower energy costs, stand up a clean energy economy, strengthen the Affordable Care Act, and of course drive down the high price of life-saving prescription drugs for millions of Americans. And so we're coming off of a moment in America where there was substantial legislative accomplishment that is going to make a big difference in the lives of everyday Americans in this community and communities all across America. There's reason to be optimistic about that, while at the same time, we know that there's been a rise of political extremism, that the Supreme Court has set us back in different ways, including in striking a blow against reproductive freedom. By the way, we believe in a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions, and we will continue to fight for that. So there's opportunity now to implement all of the amazing things that are passed into law and signed by the president, while at the same time challenges that we confront given the rise of political extremism in America.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you became the Democratic leader in the House? What's the path? How do you start as a kid in Brooklyn and end up where you are?
Well, first of all, I think you all saw what happened during the first week of Congress, so that was extraordinary to find myself in that moment. 15 different votes, never expected to hear my name called 3,179 times. Right, but who's counting? But, I think, growing up in Brooklyn and coming of age in the middle of the crack cocaine epidemic, but thankful, that I had two parents, very modest, working class parents. Mom worked for the city for 45 years as a caseworker. Father was a substance abuse social worker who worked for the state for over 30 years. And, they invested and believed in my younger brother and myself, made it clear that education was sort of the pathway toward a better life. Had the opportunity to go to the State University of New York at Binghamton. So I consider myself a cousin of the CUNY system. So it's great to be here and believe in public education, and then went on to graduate school, came back home to law school. And after law school, started to practice law, but I realized at a certain point that, I wanted to try to use the skills and the training that I had been acquiring in the art and science, the practice of the law, to hopefully represent some of the communities that I came up in central Brooklyn, to navigate through some of the challenges that those communities were facing and continue to face. And I ran for a seat in the New York State Assembly twice, lost twice, actually against an incumbent, but eventually made it to the Assembly, where I served with Keith and Adriano and others. And then opportunity presented itself to run for Congress. I say that to say to young people, in whatever you decide that you want to do, and some of you hopefully will go into public service and run for office, pursue the opportunity to make a difference in your communities. And I know that's what this school is all about. You may always see sort of the success that is achieved in terms of position at the end, but if you actually look at the journey of almost everybody, you're going to find that they had to encounter and overcome adversity. And that was certainly the case with me, starting off and losing. I think every elected official in this room today started their career, had one or two losses. Churchill once said that success is not final, failure is not fatal, all that matters is the courage to continue. I put it a different way, a knockdown is different than a knockout. That's the Hakeem Jeffries remix, y'all. You may get knocked down on the ground. You may not achieve initial success, but you can pick yourself up off the ground, learn from the journey, learn from the challenge, learn from the adversity, have the courage to continue, and I'm confident, certainly, that all the young people who are in this room, you're going to go on to achieve the dreams that you sought out to accomplish.
So I'm going to ask one more question, and then our time is short, but I want to invite just students. If there's a couple of students who have questions, I think there's a microphone right over there, right towards the back there. And we'll only probably have time for two, but if students have questions, I want to invite you to go over there right now. And my question to you is about leadership. We're the Colin Powell School for Civic and Global Leadership, and you've had the chance to experience leadership in good forms and not so good forms. And I wondered what you've learned about what good leadership includes.
Well, I've had the opportunity to serve with some incredible leaders, certainly Chairman Charlie Rangel, first African-American, only African-American in the history of the country to be the chair of the Powerful Ways and Means Committee. Learned a lot from Charlie Rangel and Nancy Pelosi, Jim Clyburn. In fact, I've got two events after this, one with Speaker Pelosi and then another with Jim Clyburn, who's being honored for African American History Month. I'd say that when I first got to Congress, serving with all of these amazing members, I'll never forget encountering the late, great John Lewis. And I see John Lewis on the floor of the Congress, and we're in close proximity to each other, and he says to me, he says, "Are you the new guy?" I said, "Yes, sir. Anybody with sense called John Lewis, sir." He said, "You're from Brooklyn, right?" Now, I gotta admit, y'all, I was tempted to say, Brooklyn is always in the house. But it was John Lewis, so I said, "Yes, sir." And then he said, "Well, I'm hearing some good things about you from your predecessor, but Washington, D.C. can be a tough place, a tough place." And then he paused and said, "So I don't want you to get into any trouble unless it's good trouble." And I've never forgotten that, because what our journey, whether that's the African American community, the Jewish community, all of the immigrant communities that have come through New York City, including now predominantly Dominican American community in Upper Manhattan, all of these communities have had to go through, in different ways, trials and tribulations to try to bend the arc of the moral universe toward justice. And one of the ways in which it has happened, certainly John Lewis exemplified this, was to make sure that you didn't accept, just the status quo, particularly when there was injustice connected to the status quo. That if you see something wrong, go out there and try and do something about it. Stand up, speak up, show up, and when necessary, get into some good trouble. And, that, I think, to me, is one of the things that I'll always take away from my early days in the Congress as a new member, trying to figure out, how to navigate the House of Representatives.
Thank you. So we're going to take two questions from students, and I invite you to be relatively brief if you can, and we'll take both questions, and then we'll invite Congressman Jeffries to respond. Three? All right, we're going to take three.
First of all, it's a pleasure to meet you. I think for the last at least 20 years, I could be wrong, the president has been switched between Republican and Democrat. Usually when a Republican is president, the Democrat is elected. So I guess the pattern is right now for 2024, like going back for however many presidential elections, it's a Republican that's I guess not supposed to, but just looking back at the pattern. How do we stop this pattern? How do you think we should approach the 24? How should Democrats approach the 2024 election? I if you don't want to comment on like specifically Joe Biden running, that's fine. But like, how do you think Democrats win the presidency in 2024?
Great, thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that question. One, I hope that President Biden runs for re-election. He's got an incredible track record of accomplishment. I expect that he will run, and I look forward to supporting him. The thing that you are saying in terms of the pendulum swinging back and forth, is accurate. Although generally, most presidents in recent times have had the opportunity to get a second term. Reagan got 2 terms. Of course, Clinton got 2 terms. George W. Bush got 2 terms. President Obama had 2 terms. There have been a few exceptions to that, including the most recent one. And I ain't mad at that, y'all. But I think traditionally the American people have been willing to provide a president, who's decent, who's hardworking, who's bringing the world together, as is the case with President Biden, and really has an incredible track record of accomplishment. I think there's a really strong case, to be made for him in achieving a second term. And I think also he's going to have to draw a contrast with, what we're seeing from this version of the Republican Party. It's not a traditional version of the Republican Party, not John McCain's Republican Party or Mitt Romney's Republican Party, even George W. Bush's, Republican Party, Bob Dole's Republican Party. It's a very different group of folks, right? Extreme MAGA Republicans. And I think it's on display for the American people to see. And I was actually very surprised when I came back home after that first week in Congress, how many people were actually watching what was unfolding on the floor of the House of Representatives, the chaos, the dysfunction, the extremism. Promise y'all I won't go through the alphabet. But I get back home and someone says to me, I run into a constituent, I've been watching y'all on TV all week. I said, wow, that's amazing. What have you been watching? Watching you on C-SPAN. I said, that's interesting. Then says to me, how long has C-SPAN been around? So I was vaguely familiar, but I said, yeah, I think it's been around since 1979. He said, wow, that's a long time. I said, yeah, 44 years, without missing a beat. He says to me, well, season 44 is off to a great start. And I think a lot of what happens in 2024 is going to be determined by the fact that what will season 44 in the House show? Democrats committed to finding common ground, getting stuff done, implementing the big pieces of legislation that we've passed, unified sense of purpose, and the chaos, the dysfunction, the extremism, which I think the American people will reject on the other side of the aisle. And that, in many ways, that contrast with Joe Biden, who is a good and decent man and an accomplished man, will serve him well in 2024.
So if I might invite everybody, join me in a round of applause to thank Congressman Jeffries for his time with us today. Thank you so much. You're a source of inspiration for us.
Let me thank the students who are here. Thank you for your willingness to use your skills, your talents, your ability to try to make the world a better place. And with all of the extremism and the dysfunction and the excess that we see in our democracy, American democracy is still the best form of government ever created, and we can believe that America's future will be bright because of each and every one of the students who are part of this amazing program. So thank you, God bless CUNY, and God bless the United States of America.
And I want to invite Anita Altman, who's one of the Feingold alums, one of the people who was inspired by Professor Feingold in the course of her time here at the college, to just share a few remarks. So if you don't mind, take your seat again, and we have a few more remarks.
Anyway, my name is Anita Altman, and I'm behalf of my fellow alumni, I want to thank you all for coming, and most especially to House Democratic Leader Hakeem Jeffries and the CUNY Chancellor Rodriguez for joining us. And it is wonderful to be here in person in the Great Hall after conducting this event remotely during the years of the pandemic. This annual series was founded by a large group of alumni in partnership with the Colin Powell School of City College to honor the memory of Stanley Feingold, a beloved, gifted professor of political science. Stanley was a proud graduate of this school and taught here for almost 4 decades. He was a passionate teacher, devoted to intellectually challenging his students. He operated from the basic pedagogical premise that students were always wrong, which was to say he challenged everyone's view, no matter if you were a liberal, a conservative, a radical, so that students would learn we should take nothing for granted and that it was necessary to analyze carefully all the facts and opinions to which we were exposed. In these times, this lesson is needed now more than ever. The reality is that Stanley didn't teach, rather he helped us to develop our own ability to learn. Thousands of students benefited from his teaching, and so many of us can testify. He made us intellectually hungry, challenged our assumptions, and taught us analytical rigor and careful reasoning. To us, he was more than a teacher. He was a mentor who inspired us to live our lives with integrity and intellectual honesty, and for so many of us to pursue lives of public service. And even after we graduated and he left the college, students of Stanley had the opportunity and the good fortune to build a close personal relationship with him. Meeting him for brown bag lunches, some on a regular basis for over 35 years. For almost 2 decades after he retired, Stanley flew in from the West Coast to attend them. It was only then, at these lunchtime discussions, that we learned his real political opinions that were passionately felt, but for all those years in the classroom, carefully restrained from sharing. Moreover, he continued to write, and we were blessed to receive his many opinion pieces. Over time, he wrote a significant body of essays which revealed his humanist, progressive perspective that challenged many conventional wisdoms. Following this event, the college will be sending each of you a communication which will contain a link to these writings with the hope that they will be read more widely, shared, and discussed. Finally, on behalf of my fellow alums, I want to express our profound appreciation to Dean Rich and his staff at the Colin Powell School for their enthusiastic support and partnership in this venture, and to President Boudreau and Didi Mozaleski, the senior advisor to the president, both of whom are in California fundraising, who, when we first approached them to establish this memorial lecture, they immediately agreed to our request. The college made it possible for us to honor our beloved teacher with the founding of this annual Stanley Feingold Lecture Series. Our only regret is that Stanley is not here. Sorry. Our only regret is that Stanley is not here to receive this honor at the institution he so dearly loved. No doubt he would have been overwhelmed and profoundly moved. We are so glad to have his wife Fumiko, his daughter Ikeda, and her beautiful children, and her fiancé Rich Deming, who are here to join in the celebration of this remarkable man who so many of us had the great good fortune to call our teacher and our friend. And I'm going to ask Ikeda to come up to speak for just a few moments. And I really thank you very much for being here. This has been a very exciting event.
I knew my father was much more than just my father at a young age. I remember hearing his booming voice raise and lower like an oncoming train outside his classroom when I would visit City College. A sick day from school or an elementary school holiday would bring me to this campus. The smell of the mimeograph paper that I would play with and the sound of Stanley's voice are the two things that hold strong in my mind. I would ask him on the way home if he was angry at his students, From outside the heavy door, that's what I heard, not yet being able to decipher between his passion when lecturing and his lecturing when we misbehaved. It was the same voice that I would hear at the dinner table when Stanley would take the opposite side of an argument purely for argument's sake. Whether it was about Israel versus Palestine or the talents and genius of Jimi Hendrix versus Vaughan Williams, Stanley would grab onto the other end of the rope and pull, forcing you to reasonably defend your side or to slide a bit closer to his, but always walking away with a richer understanding of how un-black and white this world is. He tried to teach his 3 children, like he taught in the classroom, to critically think, to constantly question, and to never blend in out of fear that your thoughts might not align with conventional wisdoms. He also asked us to keep our minds open, to remain flexible, to see all the beautiful gray spaces that live between the bookends of rigid beliefs. Stanley always thought his legacy would be in the form of a book. He published many, but it was the last one where he thought his mark would be left. But this was not his legacy. Even if he had penned the final page, it would not have shaped and changed the lives that his almost 5 decades of teaching had. His legacy is here with his students. You are his mark. He loved you all dearly. His many meetings and lunches with you throughout the years brought him immeasurable pleasure. I hope the present students of CCNY will have or will find teachers that inspire. I hope some of you will choose to work in a field where you yourself will inspire and help create a more equitable future. Thank you to Representative Jeffries, Dean Rich, and everyone at the Colin Powell School who helped produce this incredible namesake series, and all of Stanley's former students who make this possible. I cannot think of a greater gift you could have given him.
Thank you all very much for joining us. I want to thank Congressman Jeffries. I want to thank the Chancellor for being with us this evening. And I want to invite all of you to the back of the Great Hall for a reception and for good fellowship. Thank you all.